RPGayers! Welcome to another episode of Bonus XP, and today we're talking about a game near and dear to my heart, Final Fantasy IX on the PlayStation.
We're all doing the victory fist pump right now. Yeah, because that's how much we love this series.
I do. I love Final Fantasy. It's so great. I think, let's just jump right in. I feel like
I want to touch on that really quickly.
Okay, yeah.
I've had a lot of people because, we have people coming up on our podcast here soon. And it's funny whenever I talk to them about what do you want to do when we do podcasts? And the first thing they always say is I would love to do something on Final Fantasy. And I want to let it be known that I will always talk about Final Fantasy, and I don't care how many times we go back to it. I don't care if we already did a full episode on it in season 1. I don't care if we talk about the exact same things and we just repost it, because talking about Final Fantasy is enriching.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. And I think it really is a part of so many gamers' DNA.
Yeah, I agree.
100%.
I agree. I think Final Fantasy, and honestly Final Fantasy IX specifically, is kind of what got me into RPGs. It was just so different at the time, and one of my first ones I remember playing, and it was just something special about it. So I can completely understand why people would like this game, RPGs in general, in terms of all gaming landscape, why they stand out. So yeah, talking about it multiple times just makes sense.
Yeah. Why was it special for you, Jason? And
where to start?
Whether that's inside of the series, specific things in the game, or just in general. I know it's a loaded question, but
yeah.
Why was it so special?
It's a good question though, and I think it kind of defines where I came from in my gaming journey, if you will. But I played it when we didn't have a PlayStation. We rented our PlayStation. Remember when that was a thing?
Blockbuster.
Yeah. So we rented it, and
you're literally sign your youngest sibling's soul over just to do it, which would have been you.
That would have been me.
And me. Yeah.
We rented it, and I remember we got Final Fantasy IX, obviously, and some other games. But growing up with my brothers, we would play fighting games or racing games, Mario, Mega Man, a lot of classics. And they were all really good, but not really any RPGs. And so this one, I think I got it because the cover just looked cool. And I was like,
so you did have a bad childhood is what you're saying.
Oh, okay, thanks. So the cover looked cool, so I got it. And I remember thinking this game is really neat. I like leveling up. I had previously played my brother's copy of Dragon Quest on the NES. And so I kind of knew you can level up and get better. And so it was more of that. And it was really fun. And I realized maybe 8 hours in that I'm I'm only on disc 1 of 4. We're going to have to rent this again. So that was a kind of a standout moment. But
just steal it.
Yeah, to steal it. I think it was just the characters, the story, the animation was cool. The music was just amazing. And I think it was my first experience of a really grand and well done RPG. So it kind of hooked me. And I think that's kind of the basis of where it became special for me. It made me realize.
I know you played this one multiple times.
Yeah, it's one of the only ones I played multiple. Mm-hmm.
Did that change at all? Those feelings the second time you played it? Because I'm sure did you replay it when we did our Final Fantasy marathon in college? Did you make it that far?
It was shortly after that. No, I stopped after we beat 6. But it was after that. And I had been dating my girlfriend and whatnot, and she likes it too. So Laura. So after that, I played it again just for funsies, and it was great. And I think replaying it, I look back, and the game itself is kind of a love letter to Final Fantasies of the past. So the second time I played it and completed it, I had already beaten 1 through 8, plus I think 10 and other games too had already come out. So it was fun to look back and be like, oh, look at that nod, and I get this now. I get why they look like this. So it was even cooler in a sense to play it again. And it was just fantastic. But I want to hear what you all think. What are your thoughts on FF9?
So I think outside of the game, it was cool to see a lot of the media that was coming out for it, because I think there was a Coca-Cola commercial or Pepsi commercial for it.
Oh, really? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, and I remember Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine had an article published about Chocobo chicken wings that you could cook. They actually had a full recipe in there, and I remember going to my mom and can we make this? It's in this video game magazine.
Cute.
Here's a real recipe for cooking chicken. That was really cool. It didn't really feel like something the rest of the Final Fantasies had. And I think another thing too, I think it's the first positive, happy, good feels tale, where a lot of the other Final Fantasies, like, you know, the really old ones didn't really have vibes. But like 4, 6, 7, and 8 are all just very like
angsty,
edgy, angsty tales, and this one doesn't really get edgy and angsty until the end. So I think that was really cool too. It was definitely cool to see this like fantasy world that is mostly completely fantasy, at like maybe a little bit steampunky, but still like fantasy steampunk instead of like full on industrial. More my vibe of a world for sure. And that's not even talking about gameplay stuff. I want to talk about that stuff too. But Casey, what about you? What made it special?
That's honestly my answer too. I remember getting like $40 for my birthday around the time that 9 came out, and my mom or my stepdad went to buy it for me. And prior to that, I had only been like a PlayStation Final Fantasy kid, so I had just played 7 and 8, and
and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, and 7 and 8, they're both really great games, but like for a kid, it can sometimes be hard to sort of digest some of those more adult or mature themes. So when I played this, I was like, oh, Final Fantasy can be funny. Final Fantasy, I mean, there's definitely
can be colorful,
in 7 and 8, but like there's just so much more lightness to it, especially like in the first maybe like 15 or so hours with and like getting to meet Steiner or Rusty, and
it was approachable without being too kiddie, right?
And I just it's just such like a joyous game, and I think that some of that joy isn't necessarily found in the same way in like the other ones that are on the PlayStation.
I think Patrick mentioned wanting to talk about gameplay. I feel like this is a good segue. But I felt like the gameplay was also pretty approachable. Like you know what to do. Like you're attacking people with 4 people instead of 3, which is cool.
Yes, and you can like play. Can't you play with friends? Can't they like control other characters? Like I think I remember that.
I think all Final Fantasies might.
I might be making that up. I'm looking at my copy right now, and I'm like, can you
between 4 through? I know 6 you definitely can play multiplayer because my brother and I did. I think 4 might have that as well. I don't know if the later ones do, but maybe it wouldn't surprise me just because the older ones can.
I feel like you could with 9 for some reason.
I think part of the reason why it also feels approachable outside of just basic combat, like the other systems were also approachable. It's not materia. What is it called in that game?
Junctioning?
Those spheres that you would use. Like
sorry. Yeah, so like 7 materia was reasonably complex at the time because we hadn't seen something like that before, and junctioning in 8 was even more so complex. Yeah. So in this just like it's like ability points, right?
Yeah, they're ability points, and you would just insert them onto your equipment, and you just get it as you played, and it's like cool. Like this is immediately understandable, and like I get all the benefits, and then you can unequip it and still have it because you mastered it. Like that was really simple.
Such a fun aspect.
Yeah, it's like fun. And then
blew my like 10-year-old brain.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, wow, I can do all these things. Like I'm gonna go grind like crazy.
And not have to use this crappy mage masher anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, the mage masher, exactly. It's like, so that was approachable. I thought the card game Tetramaster, that was approachable.
Oh my gosh, it's so addictive.
I don't know if Tetramaster is the most approachable of the card games. Like it's fun and it's cute, but Triple Triad is definitely the best.
I was addicted to both of them.
Which one do you still hear about now? Which one did they like port to other consoles?
I mean, just because it's in Final Fantasy 14 doesn't mean that it's talking about more. I hear about Triple Triad a lot more than I hear about Tetramaster.
But again, it's simple, it's easy, and like you could pick it up and play it. You can in that game you could just completely ignore it, but it's easy to do. And then on the opposite end of it, you can also do more complex stuff if you wanted to. There's additional bosses to fight. There's mega weapons to find. There's all this other stuff that like the hardcore can jump into. So it's honestly a great starting place for new Final Fantasy players and a great like culmination of the people that have played the previous 8 games.
I think too, like it's so coming off of 7 and 8, you have 2 games where there's really no difference between the characters because
such
at the end at the end of the day it really just comes down to what materia or guardian forces you put on them. With this game, like your characters were those characters, like they legitimately your black mage is a black mage, like he's never going to be a physical fighter, right. And I think it's nice to have those defined roles because it also plays into their characters a little bit more too. And with the characters itself, like here you have a game where you don't have to imagine what the personality of each of those characters are. Especially like if you think of Final Fantasy VII, we have some characters that come in that have like very short stories that don't really go anywhere. Like Yuffie's is really short, Red 13's is really short, Kate Sith is like pretty much non-existent, Vincent's is very short. But then in 8, some of the characters are just really bland because everyone's very
Irving?
edgy.
No, get right out of here. Bland.
But 9, you know, you have all those little special like active events that you can go into, and some of, you know, they don't necessarily add big parts to the story, but it gives you little personality traits of all the characters.
Yeah, a little
like
slice
there might
of
be a
life.
little clumsy scene of Vivi or Steiner being Steiner, you know, like there's always something a little bit more that really fleshes out those characters and you really know them. They're all just expanded upon so well.
It's very Tales of series.
Yeah, I can see that too.
Well, but for the Tales series, when they do their because when they do their events, they're just faces on the screen. Here you actually see them moving around and doing in the scene. You know, it definitely wasn't the lazy way to do things. That's for sure. Okay. Lots to love. And if we buy into the rumor mill, which who knows with Square Enix, because sometimes the rumor is something is about to get a re-release. And then you find out they're just making NFTs for the game.
Right.
Or not even, or just NFTs in general that sound like it's a certain game that you really want to be released, like Parasite Eve, and then you find out that it's not actually coming out. I'm not bitter, but just in case the rumors are true and Square Enix developers are listening to this podcast, what do you think needs to stay in a Final Fantasy IX remake, and what do you think needs to go? Like
in oh no, wait, so as someone that admittedly I have not played FF7 remake yet, and that's on I know my gamer card is going to be revoked, but that is different, right? In 7, like they're action battles.
Yeah,
it's like God of War in the action sense, but if you want to do something special, you also have your standard ATB bar.
Yeah. Right.
And the more you do, the faster your ATB charges up. So if you want to cast a spell, you need like 1 bar of ATB. Okay. And then you can cast fire or cure.
And when you go into your menu, everything slows down, almost like you're pausing it to like, or like the bar is paused to like.
Well, I mean, that depends on what mode you're playing in, because I don't play no pussy mode.
Wow.
I love it. It's so fun while everything slows, while Tifa's like mid backflip.
Unlike Final Fantasy 15, it's like a good in between. Like it's kind of like the old Final Fantasies, but it's also kind of newish. Like I say, it's maybe closest to Final Fantasy 12 if you were in more control of the action.
Yes.
Well, if you're going to be remaking like FF9 remake in that vein, and I feel like if you look at the core of FF9, like it's a celebration of what came in the past. So like maybe it should be turn based. Like maybe that's what they should go with. Like this is where we came from, or like some nice middle ground, I guess, is fine. But I don't know if I want to get, you know, an action based game where I'm controlling Zidane and he's like doing backflips off of like, you know, furniture in the Tantalus to like defeat people. Like I want kind of that reminiscent experience from the past.
Do you think that's actually going to happen? Because for me, I'm also like, anything turn based, I'm there. But like realistically, if you take a look at what Square Enix is doing, you know, Final Fantasy 16 is this summer, and it's definitely not turn-based. Do you actually think that Square Enix will do it?
I don't know. If I look back at like what I'm trying to remember reading about 9 and all the articles for it, I'm pretty sure when it was made, it was like that love letter to the past. So I feel like if you keep it that way, hopefully they do. And like in today's 2023 landscape, like you don't hear about 9 too often. Like 7 is the big one, so everyone kind of knows about that. So this is a nice time where Square Enix could decide like we're gonna throw something completely new and just make 9 completely different, or they're gonna do what they love to do and just rest on their laurels and just re-release the same game, but like just enhance the visuals, keep that story like really solid. You know, give us more of those fleshed out scenes we were just talking about where you can hear more of the characters' backgrounds. That's probably what I want to go with initially.
That's my thought, and I would also hope that they keep sort of the art direction. I want like the weird proportions. I don't. I mean, but like if you look at a game like what's the Final Fantasy fighting game, Dissidia?
Dissidia.
Like, so we've seen Zidane there.
Yeah.
And he still kind of has that kind of weird, like they didn't like try to make him look more humanoid. I mean, he isn't completely human, but like, you know, they kind of keep that sort of kind of funny, weird art direction they have going. So, you know, that's one thing I would like to see. I don't want them to try to make like
super realistic.
I don't want them to
human,
stretch out Garnet / Dagger and make her look like a tall woman with big boobs. Like I want her to keep her sort of like just the art direction and the character design they have that I think is really successful, and I would hate for them to change it drastically.
Mm-hmm.
I
Patrick,
personally
what do you
think
wanna
it would
see?
it would work as a more actiony game. Like you could make it just like Tales of Symphonia, because I feel like they have similar energy in terms of like the world that they created. And like I'm imagining how that would work. And not that, I mean, like, yes, again, if it was going to be turn-based, if you could make it work, but I just don't know if like audiences want turn-based games as much now. I don't know if like newer generations of gamers like it as much as something that's a little bit more interactive, because you know, we grew up on that because that's what we knew. But like, you know, I feel like those days are slowly starting to fizzle out in gaming. Yeah, and like Bravely Default is more of that than the new Final Fantasies have been. So I think if you saw it and it was kind of like almost like Tales of Symphonia, I think that would be pretty legit. Because there's nothing really special about the combat system of Final Fantasy 9.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I think 10 is when we finally saw a little bit more of let's try something fresh and new. And, you know, that was the turn-based battles, and like legitimately a part of the strategy was kind of augmenting the turn bar.
Yeah.
9's combat system,
just ATB.
Yeah, there's just really nothing special about it. So I think that's what would need to go.
Makes sense.
Personally. Like but I mean, like they also could do something to make it more attractive if they're going to make it turn-based. If anything's going to stay, I think like what you said, Casey, I don't want it to be like we just polished the game.
Right.
And especially because
kind of like they did with 8, the remaster of 8.
Well, yeah, no. Like there are some games that have come out recently that have gotten a high level of polish, like you know, Live Alive, which, you know, like was great, and it got a lot of really great updates. And then you take a look at Chrono Cross, and not so much there. So I think if they did something where I don't know if I want a full recreation of the game like they did 7 remake. I don't think it needs it.
Yeah.
So I think somewhere kind of like what they did with Live Alive, just not necessarily those graphics, because you know, like both romancing sagas like 2 and 3, Live Alive, and the Pixel Perfect Final Fantasies all kind of look like they're built with the same engine.
Oh, sure.
So I'm kind of getting tired of seeing games that look like that. So I hope I know it's not quite the same because it was like full on 3D, but I hope whatever they do, it's really stepping it up, because there's something about that like grunginess from PS1 graphics that's also very endearing. And when you really crisp them up, like the Saga Frontier remake, for example, it's losing everything's popping, which is really nice, but like now it just kind of looks cheap at the same time too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because like your mind fills in the gaps of those pixels. Like otherwise, like, oh, this looks weird, but you know, like his eyes look like this, and then you lose that when it's shaded differently.
There are some characters for the Saga Frontier like original that I thought like I knew what they looked like, and then when you see them, they're all polished up,
you're like,
look like yeah, I mean a little bit, just kind of like, oh, derp, like this character is just so derpy. So yeah, so I think that would need a change for me.
I think speaking of just visuals in general, I feel like we kind of mentioned it before, but 9 is just fantastic in terms of color use. Like it's bright, it's cheery, like that is 9. Like when you see 7, 8, 9 next to each other, you can clearly tell like which one is 9 just by glancing for like a second. So I think keeping that aesthetic there and running with that is probably good. So you want to have like a fancy backgrounds with like great colors and good use of shadings and all this cool stuff. And I think that in your same vein, Patrick, the reference with Tales of Symphonia, that's probably where it would go, like in a similar idea. And that's I'd be here for it. I'd honestly buy whatever they put out, which is sad, but I'd want it to be good. I want it to be good.
As long as there aren't NFTs.
Yes, exactly. No NFTs. Even then, maybe, but hopefully no NFTs.
And I hope they don't change anything in the story too, because like there's some things that are just like so well written. And when we talked about that episode in season 1, Jason, we did all of our Final Fantasy stuff. Like there are some things that happen to some of the characters that's just so sad, but it's so right. Like I wouldn't want to see. That's the problem with remakes, because like when it's a full on remake, you just don't know what's gonna come.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I know you don't necessarily want to know, but like the Final Fantasy remake changes so very much. And like I'm on board for it because like for me it makes sense like why they're doing it. But like to do that for all games, I would really hate for them to change like who dies at the end of Final Fantasy 9 or like even insinuating that this character is gone or whatever. Like keep it all intact, but maybe polish up the dialogue and whatnot so that way it fits.
Yeah, that sounds like smart choices as opposed to choices just to make them. That's lazy.
Maybe flesh out Necron just a little bit more.
No, he just needs to be there in the end. That's yeah.
Well, you thought out. So what was if you're a Mythic Quest fan, it's a great TV show. And Casey, I know you're watching right now. Jason, I can't remember if you watched it.
No, it's on our watch list.
It's a show that Ashley Birch is on, which I mean, like Ashley Birch is great, and I think she wrote this episode. But in one of the episodes in season 3. It's a flashback episode, so it's one of the characters when she's a little girl, and she's actually playing Final Fantasy 9, and she makes it to the final boss, and then she starts talking about, wait, Kuja's not even the final boss?
No.
And
I love that.
It's just so like so funny. It's so good. But yeah, fuck
I'd be
Necron.
excited to see him in the remake. He's such a good weird villain.
See, they're gonna make the remake, and then the whole story is gonna be about Necron. They're just gonna add that whole fleshed out. The entire thing is about that.
Okay, homies, I think that's pretty good for Final Fantasy 9. What do you think?
Yeah, experience earned, leveled up. I feel good.
Yeah, I got about 5 more points before I get my skill that will let me be able to poop without wiping. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters for making this possible. We really appreciate your love and support. If you like us talking about Final Fantasy or things we've already talked about, just let us know. We will definitely hit it again, and you can do that over on our Discord. Or you can head on over to our Twitter and Instagram at RPGaymer.
We want to thank you again for listening. Now go out there and get gaming.